History hides some of its greatest survival lessons in places we rarely look. We study the battles, the strategies, the turning points, but we often forget the weapon that kept entire nations alive when everything else collapsed. Not guns, not planes, food, not the kind we snap photos of or scroll past on shiny menus, but the desperate, ingenious meals created when grocery shelves were empty. Farms were burning, and hunger stalked every doorstep. These recipes weren't made for flavor. They were made for survival. They were built in kitchens where every ingredient was a gamble and every bite was a victory. Families woke each morning not asking what they would cook, but whether they would eat at all. And yet, in the harshest chapters of war, humanity refused to starve. When World War II turned bread into a luxury, ordinary staples became heroic. Flour, once taken for granted, vanished behind ration books and long queues. Bakers, unwilling to surrender the comfort of a loaf, reinvented bread from the ground up. Potatoes, abundant and sturdy, became the secret weapon, mashed and mixed into dough that rose heavy, dense and unfamiliar, but kept stomachs from aching through the night. Every crumb felt like borrowed time. Carrots, meant for stew, became dessert, grated into war cakes, sweetened with whatever could be found, honey, beet syrup, even mashed turnips when ration stamps ran dry. Home cooks rediscovered the alchemy of stretching, swapping, substituting. Nothing was wasted. Onion skins made broth look richer. Dandelion greens became salad. Even sawdust, sifted, dried, mixed sparingly, helped bread rise higher when wheat could not. Each trick was a negotiation with hunger, and every plate was proof that human creativity grows, fiercest when survival is on the line. Far from home, soldiers depended on their own brand of culinary resilience. On the front lines, food needed to do more than fill stomachs. It had to keep exhausted bodies, moving through mud, frost, and fire. So armies turned calories into strategy. Trench cake, first baked in World War I and perfected during the Second, contained no eggs, no butter, nothing perishable, yet traveled thousands of miles to reach the muddy boots of a fighting son. Every dense, spiced bite carried not just energy but love from home. Indigenous knowledge saved countless troops, too. Pemmican, a mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries, could last years without spoiling and delivered more strength per ounce than almost anything else. In pockets, tins, and packs, soldiers carried lifelines disguised as food. Concentrated survival ready to be swallowed in a hurry while shells whistled overhead. For many, these recipes meant the difference between rising to fight another day or falling where they stood. But hunger didn't just take ingredients. It took the very heat needed to cook them. Fuel, wood, coal, even kindling became as precious as coffee or sugar. Lighting a fire could drain the last reserves a family might need for weeks. So ingenuity stepped in where flames could not. Haybox cooking emerged, a pot brought to a brief boil, then tucked into a crate packed with straw or blankets, where trapped heat finished the job slowly, silently, without a single extra spark. Solar ovens made from scrap metal and broken. Mirrors captured sunlight and turned it into simmering energy. Steam traps built from old tins cooked dumplings and vegetables, above boiling water, saving every ounce of fuel. Kitchens became laboratories of survival. Comfort was gone, but innovation thrived. War reminded the world that food doesn't need luxury to keep us alive, only creativity. Yet, not every meal from wartime came with dignity. Some were born purely from desperation, the kind of hunger that doesn't negotiate. When the Nazi blockade sealed off the Netherlands during the winter of 1944, tulip bulbs became food. Peeled carefully, boiled repeatedly. Their toxins washed away just enough to be survived. In the Philippines, when crops were stolen and famine followed occupation, people ground acorns into bitter, flour, and scraped nutrition from roots that animals wouldn't touch. Rats and pigeons, and once pests, turned into protein, trapped by hands that once shooed them away. Soup bones were reused until they dissolved into cloudy broth. Wallpaper paste, made of potato starch, occasionally became the last edible paste in a house stripped bare. In Eastern Europe, famine bread included weeds, tree bark, anything with fiber to slow the ache in hollow stomachs. These dishes were not triumphs. They were reminders. Survival demands choices we pray we never have to make. Still, in the shadows of occupation and terror, food became something deeper than fuel. It became resistance. In Jewish ghettos, a pot of soup shared among neighbors was a declaration of humanity the enemy could not extinguish. A single potato divided among children was an act of love sharp enough to cut through despair. French bakers, forbidden from giving bread to the oppressed, kneaded dough in secret and passed loaves through hidden doorways to those fighting in the resistance. British families saved their rarest ingredients, a pinch of sugar, a handful of raisins, to bake community puddings for holidays, reminding themselves that joy was worth risking. When culture was under attack, food remembered who people were, what they believed, what they refused to surrender. Every recipe carried identity. Every meal whispered rebellion. We are still here. Today, it's easy to forget how fragile our abundance is. Grocery aisles overflow with options. Delivery trucks arrive before we even realize we're low on something. We can choose from foods flown in from continents away, and complain if they're a day late, but it doesn't take a world war to empty shelves. One storm can shut down power grids. One cyber attack can freeze shipping lines. One economic crisis can turn a familiar supermarket into a battlefield of panic and scarcity. We live under the comforting illusion that food will always be there. But history tells a different story. When supply chains break, survival belongs not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable. And that's why these forgotten wartime recipes matter. They are more than relics of hardship. They are a blueprint for resilience. They prove that nourishment does not depend on brands, packaging, or convenience. It depends on knowledge passed down through struggle. How to bake bread from potatoes, how to store meat without a freezer, how to coax warmth into a meal when fuel is gone. These techniques once saved millions. They can save us again if we remember them. Because if tomorrow arrives with silence, no trucks, no power, no markets, what will we do? Will we panic? Or will we adapt like those who came before us? The people who survived history's darkest hours didn't wait for rescue. They turned scarcity into survival. They learned that food is not something the world gives you. It's something you create. They endured because they believed hunger could break a body, but not a spirit that refuses to give up. So the next time you bite into a piece of bread or toss leftovers into the trash, remember, there was a time when every crust was a lifeline. A time when innovation in the kitchen held up entire nations. A time when ordinary people, armed with nothing but stubbornness and scraps, kept the future alive. These lost recipes are their legacy, a reminder that no matter how uncertain the world becomes, we come from survivors, and their wisdom is still here, waiting patiently for the day we might need it again.